All right, over the next couple minutes, we're going to learn about how we're genetically similar, how we're genetically different, and some other factors that can determine our traits. So, where do we get our traits from? With humans, we could have brown hair, black hair, blonde hair, red hair. Where does that come from? In pea plants, you can have white flowers or purple flowers. Where does that come from? And hopefully, because you're an AP bio, you guys are all right now yelling at your screens, comes from chromosomes, from DNA. Yes, 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 right? Those instructions are contained in our DNA, and depending on the exact sequence of the A's, T's, C's, G's, will determine if a pea plant has purple flowers or white flowers, right? Um, so one cool thing about living things is we all use DNA, whether you're a plant, an animal, a sponge, a mold, an amoeba, all of us use DNA for our genetic material, okay? We all have the instructions to make up our structures in our DNA, and we pass that DNA onto our offspring through either asexual or sexual reproduction. Every single living thing does it, which is pretty cool, okay? Some other things that we all have in common is we all have some similar metabolic pathways. We all need to have a way to take like some kind of sugar or energy molecule and break it down into energy, right? So we all need to have some kind of way to convert some kind of sugar into energy. And we can do this through cellular respiration or glycolysis. And as we know, there's a couple different pathways things can take, but every single living thing has to be able to break down an organic molecule to make energy. Okay, all living things you might remember with prokaryotes and eukaryotes, no matter what it is, there's lots of things different, but we all also, in addition to DNA, we all also have ribosomes. Okay, so everything is ribosomes. And another similarity that we have is we're going to be talking about mDNA. This M stands for mitochondrial DNA. Okay. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about that right now. So here's the crazy thing is, how we talked about how in our cells, you get half your DNA from mom and half your DNA from dad. Well, that's true, asterisk, right? There's always an exception, and that exception is your mitochondrial DNA. Your mitochondrial DNA is 100% from your mom. It comes from the egg, always. And so you always get your mitochondria from your mom, who got it from her mom, who got it from her mom, who got it from her mom, and so on and so on and so on. So you can really trace maternal lineages by looking at someone's mitochondrial DNA, which is kind of cool. Okay, so that's one thing that all animals have in common. We all get our DNA from the egg from our mom. As far as plants, plants also get all of their mitochondrial DNA from their mom too, okay? And in addition, plants also get all of their chloroplast DNA, because remember mitochondria and chloroplasts have their own DNA, because we think that they used to be their own prokaryotes that were engulfed, right? The endosymbiotic theory, remember that? So, but as it turns out, all that chloroplast DNA is also from the mom, not from the dad, not 50-50, 100% from the mom, who got it from her mom, who got it from her mom, who got it from her mom. Now with plants, plants don't have eggs. They have what's called an ovule, but again, it's the same. It's all maternally inherited. Kind of neat, okay? So these are some things that no matter what you are, again, no matter what type of thing, if you're a crab or a moss or a pine tree or a narwhal, we all have these things in common. Okay. And even, of course, all people have these things in common, minus the chloroplast DNA, right? But all people have this in common. So this should maybe bring you to a question that if we have so many things in common, why do we see such a diversity in what people are looking like? Okay. Not only what people are looking like, but in people's genetics. Like, what's going on with that then? Okay. And here's an example of one of these big mega families, kind of like the Duggars, but not the Duggars. They're called the Caissons, and they've got 18 kids, and I believe they might have a reality show. But now they have 18 kids. I don't think there's 18 in this picture, but look at all their kids. And these kids don't all look alike. Like if you were to see them, I wouldn't even necessarily know if they were in the same family or not, right? We got blonde hair, we got dark hair, we got medium hair. We got some that look a little bit paler than others, right? So why don't all these kids look more similar? Because they're all getting mom's and dad's DNA. So what's going on with that? So we're going to look at now some factors that help increase genetic variability, even though we have lots and lots of things that are the same. Okay, so here's what helps. First thing, Mendel figured out what's called the law of segregation, which we talked about before. And basically what this means is when you make a gamete, that gamete is going to be haploid. Okay, so it's only going to have, for any particular allele, one copy. Either from mom or for dad, but it's not going to have both, right? So, you know, here's example, meiosis happening. And if this is, you know, blue is dad and red is mom, you know, these two reproductive cells, this one got a copy from dad, this one got a copy from dad, and this one got one from mom, and this one got one from mom, right? And so if we're applying this to humans and like nose shape, if you were made from this cell, then you would have gotten your dad's nose shape. And if you were made from this cell, then you got your mom's nose shape, right? And if this is you and this is your brother, you've got your mom's nose, but your brother has your dad's nose, okay? So the idea that the homologous chromosomes split apart and you only get one of them, that helps with generic variability. Another thing that happens is Mendel's law of independent assortment. And we talked about this a little bit with the pop beads, but the basic idea is when your tetrads are lining up in metaphase 1, they can line up in a couple different ways. So here we've got dad's 2 chromosomes on left and mom's 2 chromosomes on right. Okay, and if they go through meiosis, they end up making these 2 combinations. But if they line up dad, mom, mom, dad, then at the end of meiosis, we have these combinations. And what I'll tell you is either one of these are possible. And from month to month or from meiosis cycle to meiosis cycle, it might happen this way 3 times in a row and then this way 17 times in a row. Who knows, okay? So the way that chromosomes line up in metaphase will produce different gametes, and so that leads to genetic variability. Another thing, which we've already talked about, is crossing over, right? When we've got our tetrads, the middle ones kind of get all jumbled together, and what we end up with is one that is completely dad, that's called a non-recombinant. One that's completely mom, that's called a non-recombinant. We've got 2 in the middle that have little bits of dad or mom there. Okay, and so if we look here and showing meiosis with crossing over, we get 4 genetically different cells. And if there's no crossing over, we end up getting 2 that look alike and 2 that look alike. And as it turns out, crossing over happens all the time on all your chromosomes. So we're going to, every time meiosis happens, we're going to get different cells. The last thing is a random fertilization. So this can take place in multiple levels. So if these 4 sperm are produced, we know that they're all different because of crossing over and independent assortment and all this good stuff and segregation. So if this sperm fertilizes this egg, that's going to make a very different baby than this sperm or this sperm or this sperm. And then, of course, same would be true. The next month there'd be a different egg, and the next month there'd be a different egg. And so depending on which sperm and which egg meet, you're going to get very different genetic combos. And then, of course, especially if the sperm and egg are not from the same family, aka you are not inbreeding, right? If you're going outside your family, this sperm is going to have very, very different genetic info than this egg. So again, we're going to have increased genetic variability in the offspring. Okay, so we know that we get these traits from our genes, right? We get half from our mom, half from our dad. And as it turns out, there's all kind of combos we can get from mom and all kind of combos we can get from dad, which makes us unique, right? Of course, unless you're an identical twin, right? But other than that, we are always unique from our siblings and from our parents and all that stuff. So on top of all of that, okay, there are other things other than your genes that can affect your phenotype. Okay, we just think, oh, you can be homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive, and if you're homozygous recessive, then you're blue-eyed. Yeah, but in some traits, in some animals or some organisms, it's not quite that simple. So with these flowers are called hydrangeas, and as it turns out, the genotype of the flower doesn't matter at all for the flower color, okay? So what matters is the pH of the soil, how acidic or basic or neutral the soil is. And so if the plant is put in more acidic soil, it's going to be like deep blue or a deep purple. If it's in neutral soil, it's going to be like a medium purple. And if it's in basic soil, it's going to be pink, okay? So it has to do with the pH and also the amount of aluminum in it. So it's not just the genotype, it's the environment is what is affecting our phenotype. Arctic animals have this cool thing where in the summer, they're brown, typically to camouflage. You look at this snow hair. And then Doesn't matter what their phenotype is, they change to white in the winter. Okay, and this happens because of shifting temperatures or not enough, the daylight hours shift, and this triggers a hormonal reaction that causes the fur change. Again, this is not because all of a sudden they're little w, little w. No, it's their environment changing their phenotype, which gives them an advantage because, of course, now this guy blends in a whole lot better on the white snow. Okay, pretty cool. One last one, and this one is kind of the craziest of them all, are with some reptiles, the sex of the reptile, which is like gender, okay, is not necessarily determined by an XY or XX thing. Okay, so with reptiles, a lot of times their gender is determined after the egg has been laid. Okay, because reptiles lay eggs. So with an American alligator, once the eggs have been laid, if the temperature is hot or cold, all females get born. But if the temperature's in the middle, then you get male babies. Isn't that nuts? With a certain type of turtle, if it's cool, then you get males, and then warmer, you get females. Okay, and then probably the craziest of them all is these Australian skinks do a little bit of both. Like they've got the traditional genotype. Okay, so you could have a skink that's born XX. Okay, but if it's exposed to really, really low temperatures, even though they're XX, they will develop male reproductive organs and will phenotypically present as male. So you could have a male that's XY or XX, but they would have the same like reproductive, genitals, all that stuff, because of that low temperature. Pretty crazy, huh? So not only can our chromosomes and our genes influence our phenotype, but also in some rare cases, the environment can affect the phenotype too. Here are some things, some of the main topics that we covered in this lecture, and here's where you can find them in the textbook.